Natasha, what is happening? This is long overdue.
Very long. I can't believe we're sitting here right now. Since the last time we were on, you weren't even in Austin yet.
I was in San Diego.
That's right. And then I think you were here.
I was here.
Yeah. And
that was episode 37. So I don't know what the exact date was. That was probably like
April.
April?
I think it was April because I was back home in Virginia when we recorded, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
That was incredible. And we always like to give context of how we have gotten to know our guests. So I knew about you before we had met. We were saying this off camera. So we had both followed Nick Bear. And when we were doing our first 70.3, I think he was training for his first full distance Ironman in Florida. I think it was Florida. He crushed it. And then his second race, he talked about how he was introducing this new coach that was based out of Austin, which was you, obviously. So I just got to watch a lot of that content, and I was just like so impressed by your coaching ability, the demeanor that you had. And then Harry and I were supposed to do Ironman Mont Tremblant in August of 2021. That race got canceled like 2 weeks before. We didn't want to just like roll our race credit to the next year because we had done all this training up to that point. So we were like, Harry was interested in moving to Austin. I wanted to get out of New York. So we did Waco because we were like, well, we'll be close to Austin and we could get an Airbnb and just kind of check out a new city. You were doing a pre-race meeting. And I thought
the day before check-in.
The day before check-in, because we were like, we didn't have a coach. We were like, all right, we need all the help we can get. Let's get some nuggets from this coach.
This was our one piece of coaching.
Yeah. And we thought it was going to be packed. Like I thought there were going to be hundreds of people there. It was really small. It was like us and 5 other people. So we asked you a ton of questions, then got to meet you and connect with you afterwards. And you were like, what are you guys doing for sodium and electrolytes? And we were like, we're going to do this amount. You were like, well, you should probably double that. We're like, all right, check. We're going to double it. And then the thing about you that stood out to us was that even though we had never met you before, you put our race bibs into your phone and then you tracked us the whole rest of the day, even though we really didn't know each other at all, and checked up on us on the race. And that was so cool. That was super impactful. I feel like that speaks to who you are as a person and a coach. And now you're one of our closest friends and like a huge mentor and role model to both of us. So it's so cool to have you here now after having built this relationship since you first came on the show last year.
Yeah, I can't believe that this is where we're sitting after all of that. And it just shows to the impression that you made, the importance of first impressions. I don't think had you guys made such a great first impression, maybe I wouldn't have put your name down in the tracker. And then I still remember being so excited when I actually found you guys, because I was like riding around on my bicycle, cheering people on. And then I found you guys. I was actually so pumped that I had that opportunity to spend some time with you at the end of the race and help you in any way I could. So, grateful for that and grateful we're here.
Well, obviously your coaching business has completely taken off, but your competition and drive towards athletics was way before you started doing anything in triathlon. There's a much bigger backstory here with your tennis background. So I think for our audience, it'd be amazing just to get into that a little bit and talk about where you really started as a competitor, which is the tennis courts. So would love to just dive into that and hear more about your backstory there.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief.
Yeah.
But I grew up in South Africa, and hence the accent. And I grew up in a sporting family. And so I was exposed to a lot of sport growing up. And at one point, I actually played 15 sports. I don't think I've ever told that on a podcast before.
15?
That's incredible.
Can you name them?
I can, probably. But how that worked is in South Africa, you get out of school at 1 p.m. And both my parents were working. My dad was traveling salesman. My mom was working full time. And I would just have lunch there at the school. And then whatever sport they offered, I would go do until like 5 p.m. And then after that, I would still go for like private tennis lesson or swim team. And so I was literally playing sport from a very young age, from like 1:30, starting with like chess, whatever was like the in-between thing you could go do, to like 6 p.m. from the age of like 7 or 8 years old. And then I was actually really good at a lot of them, but I stuck to tennis because I had a lot of early success. And so at the age of 7 or 8, I was already playing tennis tournaments. I mean, to think now I have a 7-year-old daughter, to think if she was playing tennis tournaments, I'd be like, whoa, like that's crazy that I was doing that. And that was a direct result of my parents just being fully supportive and the system I was in, with being exposed to so many sports and so many great coaches at the time. And then by the age of 12, I was already on the South African junior team, and we were traveling. My first trip, I was 12 years old and went for a month to Australia to play tennis and travel around. And that kind of started from 12 to 18, working on my junior world tennis ranking. And I did that for until I was 18. And I got as high as 50 in the world as a junior tennis player, and was able to play in the Grand Slams, Australia Open, Wimbledon, etc. And straight from there, I had the opportunity to become a professional tennis player or to go and get a college scholarship. And I got a couple offers here in the States. I decided to go on the Pro Tour, and what that is you start with these very small tournaments, and you go through qualifying rounds, and you barely make any money, barely make any points. And I slowly chipped away at it, and struggled honestly for 2 years. I was injured, traveling around the world by myself, and after 2 years of doing that, my ranking had actually gotten decently high, where I was making decent money, and they were putting me up for hotels. But at that point, I was like so burnt out, and then stopped and got into coaching tennis. So,
how hard is the pressure of playing a single sport like that versus a team sport at such a high level?
it was high. And also everyone keeps their cards so close to them. So you are very alone. So I remember being in Europe for 3-4 months at a time, and no one wants to speak to you because they don't want you to know their personalities or their quirks, because you could use that against them in their matches, because it's such a mental game. And luckily I was able to meet up with 1 or 2 girls who I ended up playing tennis doubles with, and those became my friends. But it was, very challenging. And I was guilty of being someone that you hear the word choking or whatever you want to call it. Because of the mental game, I would choke quite frequently at the end of these matches.
Are there any matches that stand out to you in particular that were like a turning point for you?
I mean, just talking about choking, I had 2 really big matches where it was in a big tennis tournament, and I was literally 6-love, 5-love up, and I needed 1 more game, and I couldn't close it out. And the girl that I was just beating handedly went on to win the tournament. She got to as high as top 40 in the world. Wow. And then I had the same experience in London with the British best junior tennis player, and I was always also just way up. Couldn't close it out. I could barely make a shot over the net. It was so pathetic because I was so in my head. And and she went on to be again top 20 in the world. So I had the talent. I had a lot of backing because of it, but unfortunately let a lot of people down. I'd have to say that. So you didn't go directly from tennis to triathlon, right? There was an in-between phase. So you were coaching, and you love to coach, right? You found out you had this gift for coaching. Yeah, I feel like I was a better coach, and it's funny because I'm a better triathlon coach than I was a triathlete. I was a better tennis coach than I was a tennis player. And I think it was because of having to work through all those emotions and all those experiences that I could relate to players and what they were going through and coach them through those moments. Coached tennis at Club Med in the Bahamas for a year. That's a long story on how we got there. And then came over here to the States, and I was working at John Newcomb's Tennis Academy. I was traveling with their juniors. And then I went over to River Place Country Club. I started their junior program from scratch. They wanted someone to come in and create something, and I did. And then I was running their women's program, which is actually, all the stay-at-home women. That's what they do in the morning. They play tennis, and then worked my way up to actually the head coach there before finding triathlon, falling in love with the sport and saying, I want to do this instead. I'm done with tennis for now.
Wow. Were you the type of player that was someone that could kind of after your career, were you able to, was coaching the thing that allowed you to turn the book and be okay with your career? Or did some of the mental hurdles that you maybe weren't able to overcome, did that haunt you? And the reason why I'm saying that is because when I finished playing college baseball, I really felt like I shit the bed and underachieved relative to my potential. And it took me 2 to 3 years to start to get over that. So I'm just curious what your experience was transitioning into that next phase of your life.
Yeah, no, it's something I definitely struggled with. And it was actually, I became a better tennis player when I became a coach, because I learned how to work through those mental hurdles by coaching others how to do it. And even played in a couple tournaments, and I was coaching a professional tennis player at the time, beating her, and she was going off and doing really well at these tournaments. And everyone was encouraging me to go back and play, and I never got back to it just because I was kind of settled in what I did. But I remember sitting around a table with some triathletes when I started this coaching company and saying, hey, did we have any regrets? And one of the regrets was quitting tennis too soon and quitting on myself too soon. So I kept it around for a really long time.
Did you carry forward any of those learnings from tennis and just kind of that feeling, because Brett and I talk about this a good amount, just that feeling of leaving meat on the bone with the baseball careers that we had and the potential that we had into what you did next, obviously with the coaching with tennis, but also with Ironman?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are definitely learning lessons. Look, it's I learned a lot through triathlon as well. I continued to get better as I aged in the sport. You think you get older, but you just get more and more experience, mentally more so than, as well as physically, to be honest. So I think a little bit, but there was still so much to be learned and still so many ways you could improve. And I think that's just life as well. Like every week I'm like, man, that was a great week, but there are definitely ways that I can do better. And I always take assessment of that and then try to do that the next week.
How was your early experience just being in the United States? Were you the type of foreigner that really wanted to get to the US, or tennis kind of just brought you here and then you grew to love it? Because you're one of the biggest Texans that we know now. You're always pushing people to move here. So I'm just curious, was that something that was immediate to you getting here?
Yeah, I loved it here. There's so many things that we are fortunate to have here in the States that we don't have in South Africa. And I actually felt like a foreigner in South Africa. For some reason, like my whole childhood, I was barely there. I was traveling the world playing tennis, but I was so focused on my craft of just being a best tennis player that I never ever plugged into the community. I didn't do anything else, to be honest. And when I left, it was really just my family, no other relationships. And so when I came here and settled, like I had friends for the first time, and then the freedoms, that was huge, because back in South Africa, you can really walk around and go for a jog on Town Lake the way you do it here because of the poverty and the crime that was coming up. And so having that here was pretty amazing.
Did you come directly to Austin?
New Braunfels, and then where the John Newcomb Tennis Academy was, and then Austin.
Gotcha.
So close by.
I mean, how did you land on Austin? Because I feel like it's probably the perfect place for you to be. But I'm sure it wasn't just like happenstance.
Yeah, no, it was not. Have I told this on a podcast? Have I told you guys?
I think you might have. I think you've told me.
I will go ahead and share. So the reason I came to Texas is I followed a boy, and I met him. He was the golf pro at Club Med. And when I went to Club Med, I was actually there to help my mom for the Nike Junior Tour. And I was going to go back on the circuit, and I was actually heading straight from there to all the lead-up tournaments for the Australian Open. And my ranking was decently high where I could qualify into that. And then when I was in Club Med, I'd met him and I was like, well, I'm going to stay here and see if this works out. And I walked into the GM's office the day before I was supposed to leave. And I said, please give me a job. I'd like to be one of the tennis coaches. That's how that all started. Wow. We were in a relationship, and then we decided to come here. He wanted to finish his school in UT, came over here to visit him, and ended up staying.
Wow. Well, I heard that story. I didn't realize that that's what ultimately brought you to Austin, though.
Yeah, I don't tell it.
I follow the golf pro. Yeah.
I tennis brought me here because essentially, had I not found a job to coach tennis, I wouldn't have been able to come here. And so I didn't just come here just to hang out. Like I actually found a position that I could make some money, coach tennis, do something that I enjoyed versus just hang out here.
Yeah.
Could you see what you're doing now in any other city with triathlon coaching?
I don't know. Yeah, I know there's some good spots, but Austin is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
You know what's wild to me too is when I started the sport of triathlon, the city was inundated with triathletes. There was a ton of professional triathletes living here and moving here for the scene. And then it died down for a little bit, and there weren't a ton of teams around here until we started Austin Aquatics, which is the program I built before this, and then now our team. And the fact that the hub it is for running and cycling with a breakfast club, and like there's a running club like every other day.
Oh, it's insane.
Not every other day, like every day, multiple times a day. It's incredible.
I think today we passed like 5 other running clubs just on Lady Bird alone.
Definitely.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So was it your husband, Steve, that got you into racing and triathlon? Is he the one that gave you the push or pushed you to kind of go pro?
Yes. Yeah. Someone else got me into the sport of triathlon. And then my husband was the one that made me stick with it because I did it. And while I enjoyed it, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this with coaching tennis. And we just started dating, and he said to me, I will do whatever you need me to do so that you could kind of pursue this passion of yours, which was seeing if I could become a professional. And he was the one that, pushed me to quit my tennis job. I was coaching tennis lessons on the side, and then I was moving into coaching triathlon, so essentially right as I started doing the sport.
Which is so special to have a partner like that he seems like he really saw something in you and like really gave you that push when probably so many other partners would have been like, oh, it's like financially risky. I don't know if this makes sense. And he was really pushing you to go for it because he saw that potential that you had.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell this funny story. So I got an offer to run this tennis program, and they offered me like over $100,000 to like move into this space. And I told him, and I started crying at the same time. I was like, they just offered me this much money and I don't want to do it. I like, my heart's out of it. Mm-hmm. And he was like, okay, you know, if you're turning down that much money to do this, then this is what we need to do. And then, yeah, from there, I don't know if you guys know, we've built out a bike transport company.
Yes.
And that's what paid us to be able to pay for our trips to go to races for like the next 3 or 4 years. And that was a lot of work for him because he would do filming and then immediately come off and, you know, build out a trailer, pick up bikes, and then would go to a race and drive it halfway across the country so we could do this.
How many miles did you guys rack up on that truck?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we drove to Canada. We drove to California multiple times.
Wow.
We drove everywhere.
So you're racing professionally at the highest level. So you're absolutely smashed after a race. And then to top it off, you're loading all these bikes and then shipping it off to like God knows where across the country afterwards too.
Yeah, driving a 30-foot trailer back home right after having done an Ironman. Yeah, I did that for multiple years.
Were there any doubts that crept in through that early part of the journey? Obviously, when you start anything, you encounter doubt, but I'm curious like when those moments came for you.
So the bike transport company, we did really well. And that was me reaching out on Facebook to the people going to those races, because at the time Ironman showed everyone who was doing those races. And as soon as people saw our service, it was better than anything else that was out there. Multiple companies then started because of what we started.
Wow.
So there was no doubt in the business and us growing and doing well. There was doubt in the fatigue. I was so tired from doing that, you know, running that business, then the driving before a race. And I knew I couldn't race really well. And so I'm like, man, I'm doing all of this training. I really want to be a good pro, but I'm driving, 30 hours to do this race. And we did get to a point where I would fly and then Steve would take the bullet and he would drive by himself. But even that was still a lot. So.
Yeah. Speaking of Steve, he specifically requested that you tell the story of trading in your Mini Cooper for the Ford Ranger.
For the blue Ford
Ranger. For the blue Ford Ranger, yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny to see where we are now and to know where we started. I actually tell people all the time, like, guys, we realized like I had this ridiculous orange Mini Cooper and I didn't need to have that. Whatever payment I was paying, and he said, like, you were barely making any money, like you need to sell that. So I did, and then he got this, I don't even know how much he paid for that thing. I don't think it was supposed to be on the road.
I think he said $2,000.
I think so. Yeah. The seat could not even sit up straight. I had to put a cushion behind my back to sit, and then the window couldn't roll up. And so I was driving that around town just because we needed to like save money at the time. And then we had another car that was super tiny, and we drove it all the way to Atlantic City, and the AC went out on us, and we were just drenched in sweat by the time we got there.
That just speaks to the commitment level, though, of like making something happen. Like you're not going to give yourself the out or the plan B to, maybe get a side job or whatever it is that might distract you from like the mission at hand, which is becoming a pro and just doing whatever you need to do to make that happen.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, at the time, I was barely making any money, but I was so committed to trying to perfect my craft and learn from it. And it's funny to see how now I'm reaping the rewards from all that time that I spent into trying to become a good triathlete and being able to pass it on. So
I think stories like that are why podcasting is such a special message that you just don't get on other social media channels, because it's easy to just see Natasha now and be like, oh my gosh, her coaching business is one of the top triathlon clubs in the country. She's got 100,000 subscribers. She's getting brand deals, but it's like people don't understand the work of like, literally I needed to make money, so I sold my car just to save a couple $100s a month just to make ends meet. Like people don't understand the work that went in to get you to the point where you're at now.
Yeah. It's I'm super passionate about trying to encourage the younger folks by that message. Because we started there. Everyone I feel starts there. But if you just don't give up on yourself and you keep pushing forwards, like there is a reward coming.
Yeah. Would you say that was Ironman Florida? Was it 2019? Was that like your favorite race as a professional? Yeah.
So the last race I did was I think 2020.
Okay.
I I believe, or 2019. It was the year COVID. There was one race, and that was the last race that was on Nick Bear's YouTube channel. And that was one of my best executed races for sure. And so many other races that I've had a great day as well, but that one for sure comes to mind.
So you've done you did a shorter distance race this year, right? You still scratched the competitive itch.
Yeah, I did an Olympic distance in Pflugerville. So
yeah. One of the things I wanted to say, Brett reminded me of it, was one of the things I admire about you as a coach so much is you inviting younger athletes in and really like taking them in as your own. And we've got Will in the room, and we've met Gabe, and they're two extraordinary athletes, but you clearly see something in them and want to nurture that for them. And that was just something that struck home with me. It's like coaches that really are willing to go like the extra mile for their athletes, even to let them live with them, is an extraordinary thing. And I'm just curious, like, where did that come from, or like what level, or where does that feeling of really wanting to foster that talent come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think multiple reasons. Number one, I feel like it's the right thing to do. I think growing up, or not growing up, but like through my progression through the sport, I needed help when I was younger. And I wish I had people supporting me in the way that I can support people. It would have made all the difference in the world. So if I have the opportunity to do that for these younger guys, it would have totally, for me, it would have totally changed the trajectory of my career, just as far as support, as far as belief. And we're in the position to do that right now. And I just feel called to do that. But yeah, we have an elite development team at NVDM, and it's bringing in all the contacts that I have to bring these guys some sponsorship, through, product and little things here and there that I feel like goes a really long way. And it's exciting for us. That we can be a part of their future. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's almost things that you'd wish that you had gotten to experience, whether you were playing professional tennis or even racing triathlon. And you're like, now I have the opportunity to correct that and give like the mentorship and guidance to some of my athletes now that I didn't have, that you wish that you had.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But I feel like what you're doing even goes a step further, because it's like, it's almost, it's so more than just viewing them as like an athlete client. It's like there's no reason why you need to offer them into your house, but it's like, it's so clear that you really care about them as people. And like, I think we've kind of lost, I think a lot of coaches maybe lose that sight into that.
Yeah. I do. None of my athletes, it's just a client, right? They're all, for the most part, really close friends. And it's one of those things that the stress of this job is beyond just putting out a coaching plan. It's just wanting the best for all of them and putting the pieces together so that they have that support in all areas. So.
Yeah, there's something special about having a coach who can distill that level of belief in you too, where it's like you're willing to bring them into your house and just like focus on them in that critical moment of their careers where you can actually have a massive impact on their trajectory. Because like when you get early in the sport and you clearly have talent, you can go in so many different directions. It can get to your head and you can start thinking you're too good for certain things, but having a coach who can really walk you along the way is so huge. Yeah,
absolutely. And you're right, and it's just split things in moments of time that can change someone's trajectory.
It's like little thoughts.
Yeah.
Like little seeds of doubt or uncertainty that can just be planted in a young athlete's head that throws them completely off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So just trying to keep everyone on course, so that they don't give up on themselves, because we're not going to give up on them and we want to see it through so that they live out their potential, their passion, their dream. Yeah.
Totally. So speaking of coaching, it seems like there's been a couple big transition points over the course of your career, whether it's like professional tennis to coaching to triathlon to professional triathlete to coaching. So like, what was that story of you as a professional triathlete to putting on a new hat now and being a triathlon coach?
Honestly, natural. Again, I always feel like I was meant to be more in the supportive role than the doing role. And I told Steve this all the time. I'm like, while I'm going through this and I'm trying to become the best triathlete I can be, this is a period of preparation to help other people. And so I think I went into all my training saying, what am I learning from this? You know, how does it apply both mentally and physically? You know, how is it affecting me on every level of our lives, where I can truly understand the athlete and what they're going through. And I think of that often. You know, it's funny, I look at my training plans and some people can criticize it of like, well, it's not by the book because of that. I'm like, well, I'm taking into account the outside of the physical benefits we're getting from this, what is the emotional toll that it's taking on this athletes to do this certain workout, and how is this person going to recover from it, and how is this going to lead into the next workout? And so I think all that comes from me being a triathlete before.
Would you say that getting a coach, Nick Bear, was like the big break that resulted in like the thousands of hours of work that you'd put in prior to that, and then you got the opportunity to coach him, and that really helped give you the platform that you have now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, prior to Nick Bear, I had coached many people. And as we talked about, I started Austin Aquatics basically from nothing. I was working with Brendan Hansen. And I mean, we grew that program to over 100 athletes within the first year to be one of the biggest, you know, triathlon teams, I would say, you know, definitely in Texas. But then this was a bigger, wider range. You know, I pulled away from that and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on 20 people. I have a 3-year-old daughter at the time. I wasn't going to do anything, to be honest, you guys. And then that opportunity came, and it was something that I really prayed about, because I knew it was going to change the trajectory of my life. Do I keep this small and I keep my life the way it was going to be, or was God going to use this for something more? You know, and we haven't even talked about the spiritual aspect on all of this. But obviously, like, God is number one. And so when I assess all these decisions that need to be made, I'm like, well, what does God want me to do? You know, and when I say what is the right thing to do, it's, well, how can we minister to these athletes through all the little things that we're doing?
So when did that decision become clear to you? Like, what was speaking to you about Nick that made it be like, wow, this is really the type of opportunity that I need to stretch for and make sure I, one, do it, and one, do it well, or two, do it well?
Yeah, I mean, I got that opportunity. I was initially really excited, but then I was also very scared because I knew I was going to go under a microscope, you know, with everyone watching and probably criticizing. And weirdly, not that I feel it, I feel like we have a protection barrier over me, to be honest, because I thought I'd actually go under a lot more fire through this process. I just felt like, we prayed about it at church. And from there, like, for me, when I feel the Holy Spirit, I feel like this burning in my chest. And it was just like overwhelming. And I was like, okay, I need to do it. And then as soon as that decision was made, I was just all in. And it was weird. My heart shifted. Like, I wanted to be a good triathlete still, because I just had like this incredible race in Florida, and it just switched off. And I was like, I'm just going to put all that passion, all that energy into these athletes I'm about to coach. So.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize it's not like you're just going over to his house and running him through workouts. It's like, it seems like a lot of the workouts you did were documented, and like hundreds of thousands of people are watching you coaching and scrutinizing you. So it's not like you're training him. Everything you're doing is under a microscope, like you said.
Yeah, it was. It was scary, to be honest. My first meeting with Nick, my knee couldn't stop shaking. I was just like, how are they not like feeling this under the table? It was ridiculous. And then what I did to prepare for that is anytime we knew we were doing a certain workout, I literally pulled out scripts of, okay, we're talking about sweet spot efforts. What is the benefit of that? How can I best say that? I would rehearse it on my drive, because they were 30-minute drive away. Yeah. And I put a lot of time into being able to be precise with my words and come across that I knew what I was talking about. So I just like didn't mumble. And that, I think, protected me a little bit.
Is it true that you got on his radar by DMing him that his heart rate was too high, or like commenting on his post or something like that?
Yeah, that was one. Yeah.
The power of the DMs.
Yeah. It's funny because we were at Cancun is where he finally did his race, and we're at dinner the night after. And he said that message really turned him off me. He was like, who is this person? So he said, I did an aerobic run and his heart rate was 165. And I just said, like, hey, there's different zones of your heart rate. And that probably isn't like a zone 2 run. So when you're telling your audience you're doing a zone 2 run, that's probably not in line with that. I said it something like that. And then I also got on his radar because couple other people who knew about me had said, hey, if you want to get into heart rate training, you should look up Natasha. I was just previously had been working at Austin Aquatics, so everyone knew about me at the time.
Yeah, I think you have this very direct and honest communication style, and it's easy to misinterpret things over text. Like I remember when I was kind of like going through my spiritual journey, if you want to call it that, I would post some things on Instagram and you would just comment and be like, no, that's wrong. But like, if you're it's so easy to misinterpret that, but you're just saying like, that's your honest perspective. You don't think it's right. And here's why. So I think you're just very honest and upfront with people, which I think is refreshing, honestly. And it got you on his radar.
Share that to my husband.
Yeah. Steve, are you listening?
Yeah.
But that's how you got on his radar.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's funny. We coach a lot of men and in our team, which I think is so funny to me. We're probably 80% male. And I think it is because I am direct and upfront with everything, with love as well, as best as I can. So
those are the best coaches. Is there anything that you learned from Nick through that whole process that maybe you still carry with you in terms of just like the way an athlete is supposed to carry themselves through the training process?
Yeah. I can answer that in so many ways. One thing that was always amazing to me, because I've now worked with a lot of, high profile clients, and he was someone that was very quiet and patient to listen, and he always listened to me as if he knew nothing. He was always very appreciative of every little thing I said, even if he knew it. And I always appreciated that about him. Whereas, that's not always the case, because if someone knows something and they're higher profile, like they're going to let you know. He was never that. And just kind of a get the job done demeanor. He came in, was always prepared, always focused on the task at hand. And he has so much things going on at the time. Think of the business. I mean, all the filming going on around him. It's so distracting. But he was able to get himself into a space to be focused on the task at hand, which is always very impressive.
Your second podcast with him, I don't know if it was like a year or 2 years ago. It was really cool. And one of the things that he had commented on, because obviously, so you trained him for this race and then maybe a year or so went by and then you went back on the podcast. And just in that year, your business had crazy explosive growth, which is incredible, because probably now your business has maybe like doubled or tripled since that time. But he said, I think he said that he like just saw a shift in you. And you seem like you're someone that, like, when you find something that you're passionate about, you literally just go all in on it. Yeah. And as soon as you saw that, like, coaching is like truly your calling, that's your next step, like, you were just going all in on it. And he was very clear that he saw that change in your demeanor too.
Yeah, I think it was just a confidence. I think I was just always unsure of myself until then. Didn't want to put myself out there, and so everything we're doing now is still kind of scary. Just being on this podcast is a little scary, to be honest. I don't know how people get used to it. I don't know how you guys get used to it. But yeah, I think it was just a confidence from execution, and it was one of those things that I was going to go and do this. I was insecure. I knew I was going to mess up, but I did it anyway. I started a company, don't know how to do it, but I did it anyway. And then as things start coming together, you gain confidence of like, oh, I can do this. And that's what you were seeing on that podcast.
There's a conversation that we all had at a smoothie shop that I feel like it was a huge turning point for both of us, where you shared with us one of the core reasons why you found success. And Brett and I reference it all the time, but you mentioned to us at this smoothie shop, Juice Land, right next to Austin High, that you put God first in your business. And that is the reason why you've had all the success. And I think at the time, Brett and I were very unsure about what that actually meant, but it left an impression, or at least it reignited a flame within both of us, where we're like, well, maybe we should explore this a little bit more. And since then, both of us have gone through this entire transformation, really because of the words that you said that day, and the connection that we had. And I think that there was something there that day that has had a massive effect on more than just the people in this room. But I would love to just learn a little bit more about your faith story too, and talk more about that, because it's so important with everything that you're doing. You're saying you put God first, and it's so powerful.
Yeah, I appreciate that, you guys. Yeah. It's you guys have taken that and run with it. It's been incredible to see the impact you guys have made, and so to know that I was part of, igniting that flame. It honestly brings me to tears. Honestly, every church, it's pathetic. But when I see how the church is growing because of how many people you've now invited to church and the impact you're making through your small group on Monday, I'm just blown away. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you. I shared my testimony in church one day, and I actually got to this turning point when I was in my 20s where I didn't have meaning in life. Like, I was doing all these things, trying to find purpose, trying to find happiness, and I just couldn't find it. Well, and when I was coaching tennis, and then it really got bad when I was putting my self-worth on what other people thought of me and people pleasing. And it got crippling, to be honest. And at that point, that's when I gave my life over, accepted Jesus, gave my life over to God. And I said, I can't do this on my own. I need to have a bigger reason to do all of everything I'm doing. And it turned to reading the Bible, listening to podcasts on the way to work. And it was like, okay, all I want to do is hear these words and implement it in my daily life and through my daily actions and through my words with other people. And all of a sudden, like, nothing else mattered. Like, if I could just do those things, I felt the most complete and at peace than anything else, any other success, any money you could make. It was just through that action. And so now in the business, I wake up every morning and I open my eyes and I think about God, and I'm saying, God, I need you today because I cannot do this by myself. It's way too much. There's too much at stake. There's all these people that we're trying to love on through the sport of triathlon, through our team, and God has to be in it. And I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for God. And if it can be just them feeling that peace and happiness that I've received from Him, that can hopefully influence them in some way, and better yet, bring them to accepting Jesus themselves, because we know that's like the ultimate, right? The ultimate answer to life. Every decision that is made, every conversation, especially important conversation, I'm like, God, you got to be in this conversation because I cannot do it by myself. I am broken. I am flawed. I'm too weak to do this. I have strength in the fact that I'm going to say that I suck. Like, I honestly, that is my thought process of myself. And as we build this business, yes, I have confidence, but it's because I have God. And that's why this is all working out. I don't have confidence in myself because I'm weak and broken, but I have confidence that through that, God is going to step up and strengthen me.
One of the things that you had said at the Juice Land table that had a really strong impact on Harry and I is, I think you had said, the success that you see with me or my business, it's not mine. It's literally all God's. And I thought that was a really powerful message, if you'd be willing to dig into like what you actually meant by that statement.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like God is in ultimate control of everything. And because I have invited Him into the center of everything I do, it is all His. I think if I was one to go off and, hey, I'm going to do this by myself, I might have this grand illusion that this is all because of me, but I don't. Because again, I don't think anything that I've done up to this point has been possible unless there was a higher power involved. I'm not strong enough.
Yeah. And it seems like that statement keeps you really humble too, because I think what happens is people have faith and then God opens up all these doors and you're like, oh, I kind of forget about God. This is actually my success. This is my money. And it's like, no, it's Him that actually brought you all that success too. And it's been very clear, like the year that we've known you, that you've always just put God first, and like you're super humble about all your success. And it's very clear it's your faith that keeps you really humble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't even know what else to say to that, but I just think some people have actually told me like, hey, you should be more confident in everything you're doing. Yeah. But I'm like, no, like, I feel like I'm always going to feel like I'm the underdog. And I'm going to keep fighting for this mission that God has me on. Because I think once I'm like, hey, I've got this, like, I'm going to get knocked down. I know it's coming. And honestly, in this whole journey in the last 2 years, there are moments where I'm like, hey, I'm crushing this. And sure enough, like a week later, I get knocked down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I got to be in the Word. I got to,
Totally.
think about God first thing. I got to think about Him in my conversations. Otherwise, this is not working.
And then he magically works things out,
Yeah,
right?
it always works out.
And the thing is too, is it's like what you're saying, I understand how some people would be like, oh, like, why doesn't she have confidence? It's like, she does have confidence. She's just not pushing that confidence on herself. You have confidence because you have God in your life too. So it's there. You're just not directing it yourself. You have confidence because you have God in your life.
Yeah. And with that, I have no fear either. I think people go into entrepreneurship, building a company with, hey, what if this fails? I'm like, if I fail, like it's God's plan, maybe He wanted to use me in a different direction. Or this became bigger than me, and now it's pulled me away from Him because His ultimate desire is that we're in a relationship with Him. So that's something I could actually see happening. That I'm so distracted by doing this that now I'm like, yeah, no, this is not what I intended. We either got to hit you down, put you back in your place, or we're moving you somewhere else because we want you to be happy and peaceful and in the right place.
The level of confidence that comes from knowing that there's a plan and that being willing and able to fully commit to something, knowing that everything is just going to be a part of the plan one day. Like, I'm sure there's a younger version of yourself that thought you would be playing tennis, but that just evolved into the next big thing. So just knowing that there is a path, there is a plan on your life allows you to actually get that like degree of confidence that actually makes the difference. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm 42. I've been hit down many times, but somehow God picks me back up again. So, that fear is gone because of that through life experience. And guess what? It always ends up being in a place that's way better than the place before. So, God's got control of that. And look, it might not, whatever happens, might not be ideal, but God always turns it for good once you hand it over to Him. So,
yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that we had our journey into faith the same year that we were like kind of pursuing our entrepreneurial passion, just because it's like entrepreneurship is a test of your faith. So like, I don't even know how there's entrepreneurs that are atheists out there, because I'm like, how could you go through the ups and downs without like God or a higher power or something like that? It's like, you feel like you're bipolar sometimes when you're an entrepreneur, because you're like, you go from having the best day ever to like, everything is just in shambles the next day. And then the next day's the best. And then the next day's in shambles. It's just like the constant oscillation between those two things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And people don't see that.
No.
It's tough, but yeah, you need like rock steady support to make this work for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think about my corporate job too, and how easy it was not to have God in my life, because everything was very comfortable. There was no risk. There was no like really putting myself into something that my heart was fully in. And so without that, you don't get tested in ways that make you really question your faith and really have those conversations with yourself and God, like, hey, am I on the right path? And reaffirming that. So like in the corporate world, it almost is soulless. Like when someone says this is a soulless or life, like soul-sucking job, that's really what it is. Like it's absent of God in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I believe it. Absolutely.
I think one of the coolest things about you too is, and not everyone gets to see this, but going to our church Thrive on Sundays, seeing the group of triathletes that you've brought there and encouraged them to go. Maybe it's someone that's been there for 6+ months, or maybe it's a triathlete that's their first time. And the reason why I'm saying this is I think that we both thought when we met you, it was like triathlon, that was our connection point, but really like the purpose of us becoming friends and building this relationship was like, it was you trying to reintroduce us to our faith. And now we're part of Thrive and trying to grow the community and the culture. So it's so interesting how God has almost used triathlon in your life as like a bridge to bring other people closer to Him too. And I'm sure it's something you probably think about all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's how I know God is fully in this. I mean, our team has become a ministry in the sense that it does open up. You really get to know the athletes, and it opens up opportunity to have questions about faith at some point of their journey. Before, I used to be very scared about it. I didn't want to turn them off. And it was actually something I had to pray about to give me boldness to just like bring up faith in conversations when I knew someone was struggling, and knowing like God is the answer. And so I'm always looking for those moments to kind of bring that in and invite folks to church, boldly so. And it's awesome to see how God has worked in that. And that honestly is what keeps me on mission and drives me, because I mean, going back to running the company we're running, I mean, it's a lot and I'm tired, but knowing that it's going to better someone's life, you know, ultimately is massive reward. Makes it worth it.
Between Thrive and NVDM, you're a part of two of the best communities in Austin, truly feel like. And I feel like both of them play off each other, obviously, but community itself plays such a huge role in NVDM's whole makeup. Like, it's different than just signing up for a virtual coach online who's going to just give you a plan. You're showing up on a track with other athletes who are fully committed to what they're doing. They're going to push you. Even if you are a virtual athlete, like, there's so much attention and you do feel like you're a part of something bigger. So, like, that community focus in all areas of your life seems like it's really all come together and been a huge factor in everything that's happening.
Yeah, I think we grow through community. It's hard to without. I've done it by myself and it's lonely, you know, for one, especially doing the sport by yourself. And so if we can create, I think a lot of it's been created from the things I felt like I had missing when I was going through triathlon and trying to train by myself and not feeling very supported through that time. And I'm like, what can we do better? And that's what we provide for our athletes. But, you know, what keeps them, people come in with the goal of doing an Ironman. What keeps them around is the community. And again, it's mind-blowing. I love looking at Instagram just to see some of our athletes that have met through triathlon and now they're on vacation together. And we've got some couples on the team. And the community is really close-knitted them and they've become great friends.
One of the other things that I admire a lot about you is you've talked me through this before, like just kind of your perspective on work-life balance. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is I think I speak for Harry too. It's like, and I'm not just saying this, you are truly like one of the most driven, hardworking, mission-focused people that we know. And I think there's this kind of like misconception on social media of like work-life balance in general, how like you can still have all this leisure time and build a great business. And I'm not saying I entirely disagree with that, but I also think that like God puts certain seasons in your life, especially when the business is new, where like you need to direct a lot of your energy and focus into that.
Yeah. And
you're still able to do that and be an amazing wife to Steve and an amazing mom to Nadine. But I feel like you're very proud of the effort that you put into NVDM. And I would, you know, if you'd be comfortable just like talking a little bit about like your mindset around like building a business and the hours that you put in and like some of the sacrifices you make to have gotten NVDM to the point that it's in now.
Yeah. I think you don't build something that we built without going like all in and a season of life where things are off balance. One of the things that sets us apart is as soon as someone emails us and like, hey, I want to find out about coaching, I'm emailing back right away. And within 20 minutes, if they're available, I'm on a call, like telling them about the program because I know they're excited to talk to us. And then we talk about the program and guess what? They're signed up. Well, there's not a lot of coaching companies that do that. You might get a response a week later, you know? So I'm like, what are the things that set us apart? Another thing is the communication. You know, if our athlete is doing a workout, I've changed it, but for the longest time, all our athletes would do a workout. And that day I would go in and I would look at the workouts. I would give them feedback. I would check in. It took me away from my family to do that. But it was that really high touch level of service that I wanted us to make sure that we're providing for our athletes. And again, we don't grow the way we grew without having done that.
Yes.
Now that I've done that for a while, well, guess what? I've told my athletes, hey, you're doing your workouts on Monday. I'm going to check it on Tuesday. In the evenings, I'm going to spend time with my family. So right now we are in a season of life balance, which I think everyone gets to. And now it's how can we do this long term so that everyone is happy, you know? But luckily, my husband was fully on board, and you know he knew what was required and supported me. I have my mom here from South Africa. She helps out with Nadine. my daughter is ecstatic. Like she doesn't know I was gone or doing this. Yeah. She loves the athletes, you know, and when Will was there, like she would come home from school and she wouldn't even look for me or Steve. It was like, where's Will? Yeah. And she just loves them. And like we pray at night. She prays for the athletes. And so it's like, yes, it's pulled me away, but now we've created this incredible environment and experience for Nadine where she's just part of this massive community that love her. I mean, you guys are so incredible to her. So I wouldn't change it.
It seems like that all-in mentality at the beginning, there's this feeling of imbalance, but then you figure out ways to make everything kind of reciprocate on itself. Yeah. So that then there becomes this alignment where, like you're talking about, like Nadine is a part of the family of the triathletes. And when we come over, it's not just like seeing us, it's also like you able to have some coaching advice for some of your athletes as we have conversation. Then we get into small group. Like there's just all these things that kind of wrap into each other.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that's the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. To be honest, we're just doing life, and you know, it's everything involved. It's messy at times. And then when you say, okay, I feel like I can do this a little bit better, then you make those changes. I think our biggest strength is the fact that we're constantly taking inventory on our life situation, and then we're trying to fix it. And so like Steve and I, like every Wednesday night we go have dinner because Nadine goes to Nana's house on Wednesday night. And we're literally like checking in and saying, okay, like what's going well, what's not going well. You have to do that, you know, in these situations. But we want our life to be just open and inclusive. And I think growing up, Steve had that. I had that at times, loved it. And we want Nadine to have that same experience. So.
Definitely. How many coaches do you have at NVDM?
We have 16 now.
16.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm saying that is I think that the touch of you taking the first call with potential clients is so huge. Because like you said, 99% of other companies, maybe they book you for 2 weeks in advance for your consultation call. But I could guarantee you there's like barely any founders or head coaches that are jumping on that first call. Like I would think that if like us even just getting to meet you and have that experience was so impactful. If I'm a new athlete and I get to jump on with you 20 minutes, it's like, your close rate must be like 90% or something outrageous, right?
It's high.
Yeah. Because it's like a little touch that goes such a long way that most 99% of people aren't going to do.
Yeah. People don't believe that I'm still doing like those calls because they're like, how can you do that? But I'm like, well, if someone's going to come in and maybe be an athlete, a lifelong athlete with us, it's 15 minutes, you know, and then you look at, you know, just from the financial standpoint, that's going to benefit that coach for the next X amount of years. And that athlete is investing that amount of money and that amount of time. Like, I want to respect that. So,
do you still get really fired up when you sign a new athlete, like a little fist pump after the call?
Yeah, I actually did. It was really funny at the beginning of our business. I don't know if Steve ever told you the stories, but like every time like a client would sign up, I'd be like, Steve, we got a new athlete. And what was funny is I got an athlete and his name was Robert White. And Steve's first name is Robert. It's Robert Steve White. And so Robert White filled out a form to talk to me. And I'm like, and this was after we had a string of athletes. So I'm like, Steve, like, you're like messing around. He was like, it's not me. Sure enough, there's a Robert White in Pensacola, Florida. Got him, and he was a longtime athlete as well. So still a great friend.
I didn't know his first name was Robert until he called us, and I was
Steve
like,
Carrie's like, who's Robert? Yeah. Like that's Steve.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but no, very exciting.
Are there any coaches that stand out to you just through your course of tennis and triathlon that had a big impact on you?
Man, I feel like I've taken a lot of little things, good and bad, you know, of what to do right and not. You know, from an educational standpoint, I'm just like looking at like swim, bike, and run. Like obviously, we follow Tim Floyd of Magnolia Masters. He was a great influence on me at the final year of my career, not only from his swim philosophy that we use with our athletes, but then with his mental training. So he had me meditating, just learning how to calm my brain down and learning how to focus and get into a flow state. That was huge. And what was interesting outcome of that, and why I speak to it as probably the most impactful, is I was the most calm, not in training, but outside of training. Like the nothing would throw me off. He gave an analogy. I'm not going to say the word, but we'll say just a friendly observer. So anytime something happened, you just observe it. You don't emotionally react to it. And like that was like my go-to for a very long time. Like just observe what's going on and be calm, and then like figure out what you're going to do in this moment and respond. Don't react. So that was powerful to learn from a coach. Outside of that, I feel like I learned more from athletes than coaches.
Yeah.
You know, being exposed to really good tennis players as a youngster, I would look and see how did they warm up? How did they carry themselves? How focused are they in training? I even learn right now from our athletes, you know, by observing them and picking up the traits that make me want to be a better athlete.
I think one of the coolest things about meeting other NVDM athletes is just like the overwhelming passion they have for the sport. Like a lot of them, even though they're amateurs, like it seems like it consumes them, not in an unhealthy way, in a very healthy way. Because I think the point of triathlon is it actually does help you become a better person, or any endurance pursuit. And I'm just curious, why do you think so many people get so obsessed with the sport of triathlon and just want to go all in?
Yeah. I mean, it is life-changing, because you cannot try to train for 3 sports at that level without it overtaking your life. I mean, you've got to eat well, you got to sleep well, you have to get your mental game really sharp, not respond to highs and lows. And it's addicting. It's really, everyone is after quality of life. And when you train for a sport like this, you are improving your quality of life. I mean, you're looking for all the little edges of how can I feel good for my next workout, which for some people, like Will, it's 3 workouts a day. So he has to do one. He's got to figure out how am I going to recover and be focused and energized and be able to attack the next workout. And oh, wait, 2 hours later, I got to do that again. So I've got to take care of myself. And then you go to these races, and there's something about them. You're in your mind for an Ironman, 9 to 16 hours, right? There's so much growth that happens in that moment that is addicting, and you're after that feeling again of accomplishing something really hard and all the emotions that it took you through to get to that finish line. I know for myself at the end of my career, it wasn't as much the physical that I was after improvement, it was the mental improvement. How could I not get down on myself? Like no negative self-talk, and how could I stay focused? Because those things improve every other area of your life as well.
There's a part in there too that you mentioned, which is like nutrition, which is the point of this podcast, and recovery, which I think for Ironman athletes is probably very hard to master both of those. It's easy to get on the bike and develop some mastery when you have that much drive. It's easy to master the run when you have so much effort and like drive for wanting to be a good runner. But when it comes to nutrition, it's such like a scaled back, and you need to be so tactful about everything you're putting in your body and how you choose to rest, which is hard for an athlete. So I'm curious how you convey that to your athletes and make it one of the more important pillars of the whole process of becoming a triathlete.
Well, they learn quick enough, because you can't train the way we train unless you've nailed down your nutrition. And so it's one of those conversations we have really early on. And what we find is most people just don't have the education. They do not know how to fuel their workouts. They do not know what to do between their workouts, what's going to make them feel good. And so you guys know I'm a big proponent of fueling with beef. And really what it came down to was we would have steaks, maybe, because at the time it was like you could only eat steak twice a week. Otherwise, the rest is bad for you. So that's what we did, and we just did it without thought. And then we started tactfully doing it, because the next day I would train amazingly well. Like I felt amazing. And so I would do it before my Tuesday, before my really hard track workout on Wednesday, and then Friday night before my really hard bike. I'm like, wow, I feel so good. Let me recover from these big workouts. Let me do it again that evening. And then sure enough, I'd recover really well. And then I would feel great the next day. And from that, I realized I should be eating like this before a race. Because again, everyone out there like, oh, steak's too heavy on your gut and you're not going to process that. You're going to feel it the next day. And sure enough, that's not the case. I started eating steak the night before, actually lunch, the dinner before. And then I'd race amazingly the next day. And now I pretty much eat steak every day, because there's nothing else that I feel better on. and satiates me quite as well as red meat. And that's not me just saying this on my podcast. I tell other athletes too. And then what I tell them, I was like, you try it, because I never want to sell anyone on it, but I'm going to guide them and say, and that's everything. Try this, see how you feel, write it down, see how you do the next day, and then let's discuss. And then we'll come up with a plan.
Yeah. That was one of the first things that you said to us when I think you agreed to come on our show for the first time, is you said, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I think when I would eat more red meat and steak, I would recover better. And I also felt like I performed better too. And you were ahead of your time on a lot of this stuff.
She's the original Meat Mafia member.
She is the original Meat Mafia member.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I wonder how many people, I think about this a lot, like they stay away from steak, or they think that it's going to be inflammatory. So they're like, oh, it bloats me, I don't eat it. Where like how much of that is just mental versus like, have you ever just had like a really good piece of meat cooked right with like a baked potato or some rice or something like that and actually noticed how you felt? Like, I feel like a lot of the misconceptions around meat are just mental and what society has told us.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it interesting to you to see a lot of the endurance community start to actually come back to meat? Like Dave Scott, Zach Bitter, like the list goes on. There's so many of these guys who, like there's so many of these guys who, when they were performing at the highest level, maybe weren't incorporating it, and now they're like all in on it. Like this is like the way to eat. So it's just interesting to see that.
No, I think it's not surprising at all. You know, every time I hear someone going vegetarian, I'm like, well, just wait. They're going to come back. They're not going to feel very good after a little while. And that happens every single time. And so I think they started to be, instead of listening to society or whatever papers were out there, they decided to, oh, how do I feel? And you know, take that leap of I'm going to eat it, and I actually feel really good. I recover really well. Let's keep doing it. So
yeah.
Well, that clip that you had sent us of Lionel Sanders was incredible on his YouTube video, because I think he took a big dip last year performance-wise, and he had been plant-based for a while. I think he had a sponsorship with Freshie, which is like a plant-based restaurant in Canada. He started eating animal products again. He was like, I feel so good recovery-wise, mentally, like, and he'd only been doing it for a week, and he seemed like he was a different person just from that.
Yeah. No, I couldn't wait to send you that.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, because he has such a large audience. And so for him to say that, and it's just the truth. I mean, again, I can speak to my own experience.
Yeah.
I'm a different person when I eat steak. And whenever I feel weak, Steve's like, we need to get a steak. Now we just have steak all the time.
Yeah.
But more and more people are going to be coming out on that as well. And well, you know, what's interesting is I coach Alice Alberts, who just won 2 Ironmans. She just recently started eating steak.
Did she?
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, she was vegetarian for a very long time, and then she started eating some eggs and some fish, and then it wasn't too long ago, because I kept on saying, maybe try.
Yeah.
She started eating some red meat.
And she just won Ironman Maryland, right?
Yeah.
It's not a coincidence, right? Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I think a couple years ago, I remember seeing Vega, the vegan protein powder company, sponsor the Ironman World Championships. So maybe in a couple of years, Noble will sponsor the Ironman World Championships now that we've got you involved, right?
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Natasha, is there are there any resources that you've used over the years that you like try to hand down to your athletes, whether it's books, podcasts, anything like that?
Yeah, many.
Outside the Bible.
Yeah. I've sent quite a bit of Christian podcasts to some folks. I'll tell you that much. Will's actually received a few himself. But yeah, anytime I hear, there's so many good resources out there. So anytime I hear something that I'm like, okay, people need to maybe hear it from someone else to believe me on this. And then I send them, you know, a video or podcast. I used to actually, while I was training, I don't listen as much because I feel like when I train, I just want my mind to be clear. But when I was training before, I listened to hours of podcasts on nutrition, on training, on mindset. And so anytime I heard a good one, I'd pass it on to any athletes I was coaching at the time. So.
Yeah.
That's one of the cool things about triathlon is like you have so much unimpeded time where it's like you could throw in like an audio book or a podcast and you can learn all these things while you're exercising too.
Yeah. And there's so many ways to do things that we're always looking to improve upon what we're doing. And I think that's honestly like maybe a key to our success is we never just stay in one place. where we go through a build of preparing our triathletes, and then we go, what went well and what can we do better? And then we shift things around, and then we might hear something new and like, okay, the Tour de France teams, they're doing this. Let's try it. And I usually, when I was training, I test monkeyed myself. And now we do test monkey some athletes. And we see how they respond. And sure enough, like, we learn from that. And then we have the greater group do it. And that's our coaching philosophy, to be honest.
That's so cool. What's the best way for people just to connect with you, to learn more about what you've got going on, or if they're interested in NVDM coaching, where can they reach you?
Yeah, just the website, nvdmcoaching.com. I get the email.
You get the call.
You get the call. And then I'm on social media. I'm Natasha, VDM81. But NVDM coaching goes direct to my email.
Well, this has been a special episode for us. I know you know that, but I'm so appreciative of you coming on. This was great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Natasha. From Waco to our first baptism in a year. It's pretty cool. It's really special.
Crazy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.